After being with him for 4 years, he married my best friend, and now that I'm rich, he wants to woo me again. Thomas, the man I have loved for 4 years, has been in a strong relationship with him, and I think he will propose to me soon. Until that day, a sudden video completely shattered my dream of getting married. I was sitting in the office, holding a cup of coffee, casually browsing Instagram, when my heart suddenly stopped. A wedding video was playing on the screen. The bride in the video was not someone I imagined, but Sarah, my best friend from college. My heart was pounding, and the coffee cup slipped from my hands and shattered to the ground with a thud. The groom in the video was Thomas, my boyfriend of 4 years. He was wearing a black tuxedo and solemnly put the ring on Sarah's finger. My hands were shaking, and I clicked the play button in disbelief. Everything in front of me made me feel completely collapsed. They were shown exchanging vows at the Golden Palace, where Thomas and I had planned to get married. Those familiar flowers, the same color scheme, even the song playing in the background, were all chosen by us together. It was as if everything was mocking my past silly dreams. I can still feel the sting, the pain of being completely betrayed. My assistant Amy heard the sound of the coffee cup breaking and rushed in to ask me what happened. I was speechless and could only turn off my phone. My mind was blank. Amy looked at me nervously and said in a low voice, "What happened? Are you okay?" "That's impossible," I murmured, almost under my breath. "Thomas, he should be at a medical conference in Chicago." Thomas had been busy with his work at the hospital for the past 3 months and had hardly seen me. So I thought everything was normal until that day, when I suddenly realized that things had changed. I recalled Sarah's sudden lack of response and call answering in the past few months, and her changing of her phone number. I couldn't believe that these things were happening right under my nose. Her behavior became more and more strange. She began to frequently appear in restaurants near my house, and every time she had lunch with Thomas, it was so coincidental. She always said naughtily, "Pull up a chair, Thomas, don't let her reject me." Thomas always smiled and responded, "Of course, you should never let others feel ignored." I was starting to get nervous. I had never felt so uneasy before. Whenever I saw them being so close, I felt something was wrong. Sometimes, Sarah would laugh at Thomas' jokes and gently touch his arm, and the physical contact made me shudder. Late at night, I saw the text message she sent to Thomas, which read, "I'm too tired from work and miss you. Are you free tonight?" My heart couldn't help but beat faster. I opened the chat history with Thomas. The last message was, "Miss you, baby. This meeting is so boring. Can't wait to get home to see you." I stood in front of the computer, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. What could I say? Congratulations on your marriage. Or ask how long you had lied to me. It was clear to me that I had been betrayed by everyone, not just Thomas, but Sarah as well. As if possessed by a ghost, I clicked on Sarah's Instagram profile. At that moment, time seemed to freeze, and my breath stopped instantly. On the screen, there were dozens of wedding photos. In the photos, Thomas was kissing Sarah's cheek affectionately, and their family members were around them, with happy smiles on their faces, celebrating this wedding that looked extremely expensive. Every photo was like a knife stabbing straight into my heart. I looked at their sweet moments in the honeymoon suite, the first dance photo, with the caption, "Just know that sometimes love happens in unexpected ways, #justmarried, #perfect." These words and photos were like slaps in the face. At this moment, my phone suddenly started buzzing, and messages from multiple friends kept pouring in. "Lana, did you see that? I can't believe they did this. Are you okay?" These caring words made me feel extremely blinded at the moment. I didn't want to face their pity, and turned off the phone with trembling fingers. I stood up tremblingly and walked towards the bathroom with weak steps. Every step was like stepping on cotton, soft and powerless. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror, looking at the haggard face in the mirror, I could hardly recognize myself. Lana Chin was once a successful marketing director and Thomas's girlfriend of 4 years, and he was a promising young doctor. But now what am I? Just a fool who didn't realize that my boyfriend had fallen in love with my best friend. What makes me most sad is that just last week, I went wedding dress shopping with great joy. Thomas finally proposed to me after 4 years of dating. I thought we were finally going to plan our future together and walk into the marriage hall hand in hand. But now, the ring that once made me so happy felt like fire burning my skin. I pulled it off without hesitation and threw it into my wallet. Memories flooded back like a tide, completely drowning me. I can still vividly remember the scene when Sarah helped me choose the decorations for my engagement party. She was smiling brightly at that time, but I never thought that she might have been secretly in love with Thomas. She also insisted on being my bridesmaid, and I could even imagine how she laughed at my stupidity behind my back. And Thomas canceled our anniversary dinner because of an emergency surgery. At the time, I felt sorry for his hard work, but I never imagined that his so-called emergency might be to be with Sarah. Thinking of this, my chest began to tighten, and the familiar feeling of panic came over me. Just then, the office door suddenly opened. "Miss Chin, your meeting with Maxwell Industries will start at 2 p.m. Hearing this, I felt the whole world start to spin. I couldn't breathe, and everything in front of me became blurry. Cancel. I want to cancel everything. I managed to utter a few words, and then my vision went black, and I slowly slid down the bathroom wall. When I woke up again, I could hear the monotonous beeping of the machine. Doctors gathered around me and explained to me that I had just experienced a severe anxiety attack. As I lay in my hospital bed, my phone lit up nonstop with messages from friends and family, knowing that none of them could be there for me when I needed them most. Meanwhile, according to Thomas and Sarah's latest Instagram post, they were enjoying their honeymoon. That night, lying on the hospital bed, I made a decision. Lana Chin, the fool who trusted others and wasted for years of her youth, died today. In her place will be a stronger person, one who will never let anyone hurt her again. Ignoring the doctor's advice, I resolutely went through the discharge procedures. As soon as I walked out of the hospital, my cell phone rang. It was a text message from an unknown number with a photo of a Maxwell Industries business card attached. "Ms. Chin, we still want to discuss the acquisition proposal with you. Perhaps we can discuss it in detail over dinner tomorrow." I was overwhelmed with mixed emotions when I saw this news. Thomas and Sarah thought they had won, that they could easily defeat me. But they were wrong. They had no idea what was going to happen next. Tomorrow, I will meet with Maxwell Industries. I knew their company was exactly what I needed to start my own. For me, revenge was to become incredibly successful and powerful. When Thomas and Sarah finally returned from their honeymoon, they would no longer recognize the woman they had betrayed. I walked in the cool of the night, my head held high. Let them enjoy their wedding photos and honeymoon bliss. Soon, they will learn that karma has a special way of collecting debts, and I will be karma's most effective debt collector. I will make them pay a heavy price for what they have done. I will use my success to make them understand that the consequences of betrayal are something they cannot bear. Exactly 2 months after that nightmare wedding betrayal, I sat calmly across from Richard Maxwell, CEO of Maxwell Industries, in a top-floor loft office with huge floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bustling city. The soft light on the desk added a touch of coziness to this serious business meeting. Richard's proposal was simple and clear. He would invest in my marketing company and help it grow into a global enterprise. What I needed to do was to help him reshape the brand image of Maxwell Industries as a whole. "Miss Chin, your reputation is more influential than you are," Richard said, gently pushing a contract from his expensive mahogany table. He paused, a hint of challenge flashed in his eyes. "But are you sure you are ready for such a big deal?" If I were the naive me, I might have hesitated and retreated in the face of such a challenge. But after experiencing the baptism of betrayal and pain, I am no longer the Lana of the past. I picked up the pen without hesitation and signed my name on the contract without any hesitation. "When do we start?" I asked firmly. The next morning, I walked into the office in an expensive designer suit that cost more than my monthly rent. My first order of business was to fire the employees who knew about Thomas and Sarah's betrayal. In silence, by lunchtime, half of the office seats were empty. "You've made quite a splash," Amy said as she brought me a cup of coffee. She was the only employee I kept, and the only one who was honest with me during my most difficult times. It wasn't long before the business papers began reporting on my deal with Maxwell Industries. I smiled and opened my laptop to check the news, and sure enough, the company's stock price had risen 40% since the announcement. At this time, my cell phone rang. It was a message from Richard. "Come to the most upscale restaurant in town tonight. I want you to meet someone." That night, in that luxurious restaurant, Richard introduced me to his nephew Harrison Maxwell. The first time I saw him, I understood why half of the city's socialites flocked to him. He had black hair, green eyes, and a charming smile that could melt ice. "So, you are the smart Miss Chin," Harrison said, pulling out a chair for me. "Uncle Richard keeps talking to me about you." In the following time, we enjoyed 5-star food, drank fine wine, and enthusiastically discussed business, art, and travel. I wondered in my heart if he knew about my recent, much-publicized breakup, which had become the talk of the town's elite. Yet, he didn't mention it, and instead engaged me as an equal force to be reckoned with. As the weeks and months passed, my company changed dramatically. We attracted international clients, opened offices in 3 countries, and doubled our revenues. One morning, my picture was in the pages of a business magazine, hailed as the marketing genius who had revolutionized the industry. One day, I was in my office reviewing quarterly reports when Amy rushed in. "Lana, you have to see this," she said, turning on the wall-mounted TV. On the screen, Thomas was being interviewed about the hospital's poor financial situation. The hospital is facing unprecedented challenges because I had successfully persuaded its largest donor to invest in Maxwell Industries. Thomas looked uneasy and stuttering on the screen, his once confident demeanor replaced by a nervous look. The reporter asked, "Sources said that your wife's hospital is facing layoffs, which has undermined the confidence of donors. What do you think about this?" I looked at the screen, couldn't help laughing, and turned off the TV. Sarah's obsession with showing off their lavish lifestyle had now, as I had expected, caused them trouble. The generous donor did not like the idea of his money being used to finance someone else's honeymoon. Just as I was immersed in this little pleasure, Amy's voice rang out again. "Miss Cheen, Mr. Harrison Maxwell is here to see you." Harrison walked into the office with a cup of coffee and a folder in his hand. "I thought you might want to take a look at this before we go public," he said, handing me the folder. I opened it and saw a proposal for a multi-billion-dollar joint venture between our 2 companies. "Why me?" I asked in confusion. His expression became a little serious, and he answered seriously. "Most people would have collapsed long ago after what they did to you, but you built a business empire." On the night of the annual Business Excellence Awards, I stepped onto the stage in a dazzling red Versace gown. In the crowd below the stage, I immediately spotted Thomas and Sarah, who were working hard to maintain the hospital's reputation and status on behalf of the hospital. "Success is the best revenge." I said into the microphone, my eyes locked on them. But quickly, I added, "But true success is not revenge at all, but becoming someone you never imagined you could be." After the awards ceremony, Harrison found me on the balcony. "That was a great speech," he said, throwing his coat around me. "You were serious about revenge?" he asked quietly. I turned around slowly, realizing how close he was to me. I lowered my head slightly and whispered, "I admit that I did want revenge at first, but now I just want—" I raised my head and met his eyes. His hand gently stroked mine. The next morning, the sun shone gently on every corner of the city, and my life completely opened a new chapter. Harrison and I leaving the award ceremony together quickly went viral on social media, and the business world was abuzz with talk of a potential merger between our 2 companies, putting our professional and personal relationship at the center of attention. Driven by this trend, our company's stock soared again. At the same time, I received some messages from mutual friends saying that Zer tried to contact me, that she missed me, and that she regretted everything that happened. But at that time, I was fully devoted to the grand blueprint of building a business empire and had no time to care about her so-called regrets. Thomas, in turn, sent me a desperate email begging me to help get the donors back to the hospital and saying he wanted to talk to me about everything that had happened. I simply forwarded the email to my assistant with the instruction archive. 6 months after signing with Maxwell Industries, I hosted a huge charity gala in my new penthouse apartment. The apartment is spacious and bright, luxuriously decorated, and from the huge floor-to-ceiling windows, you can enjoy a panoramic view of the entire city. At the party, the city's elites from all walks of life gathered together, their eyes full of amazement. Watching Harrison and I jointly announce the establishment of a billion-dollar foundation to support young entrepreneurs in pursuing their dreams. "You did it," Amy whispered beside me, her eyes full of pride. She looked at the applauding crowd and added, "You are now worth more than the entire Thomas Hospital." I looked around the room at the business I had built with Harrison's support, and my heart was filled with pride, and a smile appeared on my face unconsciously. My future is full of light and infinite possibilities. The woman who once cried in despair in the ward now seems to have become a distant and unfamiliar existence. Just then, my cell phone rang with a news alert. The hospital board announced leadership changes and Dr. Thomas Mitchell stepped down. I just glanced at it and closed the notification without reading any further. Their story is no longer a part of my life. Harrison held my hand tightly and asked with a smile, "Are you ready to show them the next plan?" I smiled back at him, and for the first time, I truly felt how powerful I was. They will never know what kind of shock I will bring to them next. The once fragile Lana had completely died in that ward, and the brand new me had just embarked on a journey full of infinite possibilities. Spring has arrived as expected, bringing a vibrant scene to the city. Flowers are blooming on both sides of the streets, and the air is filled with fresh floral fragrance. For me, spring brings more than just beautiful natural scenery. It also marks a new chapter in my life. As time goes by, Harrison and I spend more and more time together. What started as business meetings slowly turned into romantic dinner dates that often lasted until midnight, and one time we wandered through the gardens after attending a charity event there. The garden was brightly lit, and the soft light illuminated our way forward. Suddenly, Harrison stopped and said to me seriously, "You know what? We have worked together on 43 projects, but I haven't formally invited you to a real date yet." He turned around, and his green eyes sparkled in the light, as if hiding endless tenderness. I pretended to check the calendar and responded playfully, "Mr. Maxwell, I think I'm free tomorrow night." The next night, Harrison had a big surprise for me. He took me to the romantic city of Paris in his private jet. In Paris, we sat on the top of the Eiffel Tower to enjoy dinner, and the city lights were twinkling under our feet like a dream. He gently reached out, took my hand, and said lovingly, "Lana, I have never met anyone like you. Most people would have been crushed by what you went through, but you turned that pain into a powerful driving force for success." Under his gaze, I completely relaxed my tense nerve for the first time in months. We talked until dawn, sharing our childhood dreams, our deepest fears, and our visions for the future. As the sun slowly rose over the Parisian sky, casting its warm rays upon us, he kissed me gently. This kiss, unlike anything Thomas had ever given me, was filled with sincerity and mature love, and I was intoxicated by it. When we returned to the city, word of our relationship spread quickly, and major magazines dubbed us the power couple, praising us for changing the industry together. One morning, I was reviewing the company's financial statements in my office and was surprised to find that the total value of our company had reached an all-time high. Just then, my assistant Amy hurried into the office and said, "Lana, Sarah is outside. She designed the plan for our new headquarters and wants to see you." I took a deep breath, calmed down, and said, "Let her in." Sarah walked into the office, looking very different from the confident girl I remembered. The designer clothes she wore could not hide the tiredness and haggardness on her face. She looked at me with a pleading look in her eyes and said, "Lana, please help us. The hospital is on the verge of collapse and Thomas has hardly slept. We really need your help." I looked at her coldly and responded, "When you were planning the wedding with Thomas behind my back, you didn't care about my happiness so much." She tried to defend herself. "We really love each other, and sometimes emotional things are just hard to control." I stood up and said in a calm but firm voice, "No, Sarah, relationships don't happen this way. You made a choice to betray me, and you are here now only because you need something from me. The answer is no." At this moment, Harrison walked into the office. He understood the situation at a glance and immediately stood beside me. His presence seemed to give me endless strength and support. Sarah saw Harrison and her eyes widened. She said in surprise, "So, the rumors are true. You are really together with Harrison Maxwell." I looked at her and asked, "Do you have anything else to say?" She turned around and prepared to leave. When she was at the door, she stopped and whispered, "We never meant to hurt you." I responded, "But you did hurt me. The difference is that I no longer need to respond with revenge. My success now is the best answer." After Sarah left, Harrison gently pulled me into his arms. I raised my head and looked at him, and suddenly an unprecedented feeling surged in my heart. I realized that this was the first time I had truly felt happiness. That weekend, Harrison took me to his beach house. We took a leisurely walk along the coastline at sunset. He suddenly stopped, his expression became a little serious, and said, "Lana, I have something to tell you. When Uncle Richard first told me about you, I was only interested in your business acumen. But when I met you and saw your strength and grace under pressure, I fell in love with you and the woman behind this success story." My heart skipped a beat. Never before had anyone understood and appreciated me so deeply. Over the next few months, our bond grew stronger. Unlike Thomas, who would always try to compete with my success, Harrison would celebrate every victory with me. When I successfully won an important international project, he would carefully prepare a grand celebration dinner for me. When his company won a prestigious award, I would be the first to send my most sincere blessings. One evening, I was working overtime in the office when I received an email from Thomas. He wrote, "It breaks my heart to see you in the paper with him. We had so many wonderful memories together, and I knew I had made an unforgivable mistake. When Harrison came to pick me up from work, I showed him the email. He showed no jealousy at all, but smiled and said, "He's right." He made a mistake, the biggest mistake of his life, and life is a funny thing. Who would have thought that just a year ago, I was happily preparing to get married to someone who was about to betray me, and now, I am building a future with someone who has taught me what true partnership is. At a board meeting, I was presenting the company's latest expansion plans. Inadvertently, I caught a glimpse of Harrison staring at me intently. His eyes were full of pride and love, mixed with an indescribable emotion, as if announcing to everyone that I was the brightest being in his eyes. That evening, we met for dinner at my favorite rooftop restaurant. Harrison looked nervous. He whispered, "Remember when we first met, I asked you if you were this unstoppable force that could turn pain into strength? I've never seen anything like you." I smiled and replied, "I'm just trying to survive." He shook his head seriously and said, "No, you are showing your true self to the world, and that's what makes you different." Then he slowly reached into his pocket and said, "I hope you will consider becoming a permanent member of the Maxwell Empire." My heart instantly rose to my throat, and my breathing became rapid. He took out a small velvet box, but before he opened it, his cell phone rang. Harrison sighed helplessly. "There's a major crisis in the London office, and I have to go deal with it." I held his hand tightly and said, "Go ahead, we have plenty of time." Looking at his back as he hurried away, I felt a lot of emotions in my heart. How different this was from my relationship with Thomas. With Harrison, there was no anxiety, no fear of betrayal, just deep trust, respect, and true love for each other. Thomas and Sarah arguing outside their lawyer's office suddenly appeared in major media outlets. Rumor has it that they might be breaking up. If it were in the past, such news might have made me feel a little happy. But now, I hardly feel anything special. "Miss Cheen," Amy's voice interrupted my thoughts. "Investors in Tokyo are ready to take your call." I turned around with a smile and threw myself into my work. I felt that my past with Thomas and Sarah was like another life. That experience made me who I am today and made me cherish the present even more. As every business newspaper headline reported, the hospital board had lost confidence in Dr. Mitchell's leadership. I sat in my top floor office, sipping my morning coffee and watching the city wake up. I had no hand in Thomas' downfall. It was his and Sarah's own doing. The board meeting video was leaked, Amy said, placing a tablet in front of me. In the video, Thomas desperately tries to explain the hospital's huge financial losses. Sarah sat behind him, her expensive designer clothes and dazzling diamond jewelry in stark contrast to their discussions of budget cuts and layoffs. "This is the biggest failure of healthcare management in the city's history," Amy added. And obviously Sarah isn't helping their situation by posting on Instagram about their third vacation of the year. I quietly closed the tablet. At this time, I received news about the crisis in Maxwell's London office last night. Harrison has dealt with it properly, and he will fly back this morning. "Good morning." Amy paused, then smiled and asked me, "Should I clear your schedule now, so you can make up for the dinner that was interrupted last night?" I was about to respond when an urgent message popped up on my phone. Sarah was live on social media, her face tear-stained and mascara running down her cheeks. "This is all meant to be." She cried to her fans. Thomas assured me that everything would be fine. He said the hospital would always support us. However, the comment section was filled with cruel messages, with former patients sharing their experiences of canceled appointments and hospital staff revealing they had been forced to take pay cuts, all while Sarah posted updates on her recent shopping spree. I have to say, karma comes at just the right time. Just then, the office door opened and Harrison walked in. He was wearing a travel suit and looked a little tired, but still very handsome. "Everything has been arranged in London," he said, kissing me gently. "I was just about to ask you that question." Before he finished speaking, his phone rang again. It was Richard Maxwell. "Uncle, what's wrong?" Harrison's expression suddenly became serious. After he hung up, he turned to me with a twinkle in his eye. "The hospital board is offering to sell, and they want Maxwell Industries to take over." I leaned back in my chair, smiled, and asked, "Who will be in charge of this acquisition?" I already had the answer in my mind. Harrison was so smart, and I happened to be good at turning around troubled institutions. Just then, Amy said, "Lana, Thomas is in the hall, and he wants to see you." Harrison's jaw tightened slightly, and I gently placed my hand on his arm and stood up. "It's time to face it." Thomas looked nothing like the confident doctor I had once loved. His expensive suit was wrinkled, and his eyes were troubled. "Lana, please," he began. "The hospital needs you." I need you too. I smiled dryly. That's funny. I still remember how much I needed you the night you married my best friend. He flinched slightly. I made a mistake, Lana. It was me, not the hospital. The hospital meant everything to me, and now it's falling apart. The hospital is not falling apart because of me, Thomas. You chose to betray someone who loved you. You chose to marry a woman who cared more about social media status than patient care. You chose to prioritize luxury over the interests of your employees. I'll do anything, he pleaded. Whatever you want, just save the hospital. Harrison stepped forward and said, in fact, Dr. Mitchell, you should make any business proposals directly to our acquisition team. This is standard procedure. Thomas' eyes flickered between the two of us before finally realizing, you're buying the hospital? Maxwell Industries. I corrected him. Yes, I will oversee the restructuring, and the hospital will be saved, but not by you. Thomas left, looking frustrated. Harrison pulled me into his arms. Have I ever told you how incredible you were that night? At the dinner celebrating the hospital's acquisition, a romantic atmosphere enveloped the entire restaurant like a soft veil. Candlelight flickered on the dining table. Exquisite tableware gleamed in the light, and the air was filled with the aroma of delicious food and the fragrance of champagne. Harrison and I smiled at each other. Just as we were immersed in this joyful moment, my phone suddenly lit up. It was a notification that Sarah had posted a new status. This time, she announced her breakup with Thomas. Sometimes the person you betray everything for turns out to be the wrong choice, she wrote. Thomas and I have parted ways. The comment section instantly exploded, with many people commenting that this was karma. But as I read the news, my heart was extremely calm, without a single ripple. Their pain can no longer stir any emotion in my heart. I have long walked out of that dark time and left them far behind. You know what, Al? I held Harrison's hand across the table and whispered. Harrison looked at me tenderly, his eyes full of affection. This time, I've wanted to ask you something for several days. As he spoke, he slowly took out the velvet box that was interrupted before. This time, no phone rang suddenly, no emergency came to disturb us. There were only the gorgeous lights of the city around us, gently sprinkled on us, as if the whole world was quiet for this moment. He opened the box, and inside was an elegant and unique ring, completely different from the one Thomas had once given me. This ring is so perfect, just like the love between us, unique and irreplaceable. The next morning, the sunlight shone into the room through the soft curtains. The news of our engagement quickly spread throughout the media. I got one last email from Sarah. Congratulations, she wrote. You won, you got it all, the success, the man, the hospital. I hope this makes you happy. I just looked at the email quietly, then clicked delete without replying. She never understood that it was never about winning or losing, but that I finally became the person I always wanted to be. That afternoon, the hospital board announced that Thomas and Sarah had officially resigned. Sarah announced that she had moved back to her hometown, and the wedding photos that once showed off their perfect life. They were also deleted from social media one by one, replaced by news headlines about their lows. We were preparing to do our utmost to save the hospital and start a new chapter. Harrison held the acquisition documents and asked me with a smile if I wanted to review them with him. I looked at him and smiled, the engagement ring on my hand shining brightly under the light, a symbol of our love and future. We stayed up late together, carefully planning the hospital's renovation plan. In the process, I realized more and more deeply that the best revenge is not to watch them fall, but to soar high. Their betrayal, now nothing more than a distant, blurred memory, was a stepping stone on my way to something greater. I couldn't help but sigh that the universe really seemed to have a magical power that could balance everything in the world, and karma made a perfect judgment in just 2 weeks. Harrison and I were married. I stood in my brand new office at the hospital, overseeing the renovation of the walls. Once displayed, the Thomas Medical Award is now completely renovated, showcasing our grand vision for the future's most advanced facilities, research centers, and patient care programs. Ms. Cheen, a nurse, knocked gently on the door and said, "Someone is here to see you." She said she is your mother. Mom walked in slowly, her eyes darting around the hospital. Taking in the dramatic changes before her eyes, she said softly, "It looks different." I looked at her with mixed feelings. She had sided with Thomas and Sarah, accusing me of being too career-focused and saying Sarah would be a better wife. Her uninvited visit made me wary. Sarah's mother called me. Mom continued. She was very worried about Sarah and said that Sarah was in a bad state. Lana, she returned to her parents and is taking anti-anxiety medication. I listened quietly, without saying anything, and continued to sign the documents. She wants to meet you before you get married and apologize to you. Thomas is also leaving the city to work in a small clinic in another state. They both want this to end. I put down my pen and said calmly, "And?" They made their choice long before they planned the wedding behind my back. "Lana, please. You won. You have everything now. Can't you forgive them in your heart?" Just then, Harrison appeared at the door. He immediately noticed the tense atmosphere in the room and immediately came over to me, asking with concern, "Is everything okay?" My mother's eyes widened as she looked at Harrison's protective attitude, then at the sparkling diamond engagement ring on my finger. She said, "You must be her fiancé. I'm Lana's mother, and I once said she was not fit to be a wife." Harrison's voice was polite, but a little cold. Interesting timing, bringing up a topic from 2 weeks ago. On the eve of the wedding, a tense yet sweet atmosphere permeated every corner. I was busy making final preparations in the office, and my mother stood aside, as if she wanted to say something to me. At this moment, the phone in the office suddenly rang urgently. I quickly picked up the receiver, and it was the hospital board calling. They confirmed the final decision, and the ownership of the hospital was officially transferred. The moment I hung up the phone, an indescribable sense of completion came over me. I turned around slowly, looked at my mother, and whispered, "Mom, there's no need to end the relationship between Thomas, Sarah, and me. I'm not angry or hurt anymore. I've just had enough. They are just a part of my past, and I have built a brand new future." Mom seemed to want to protest, and I gently raised my hand to stop her. "If you want to participate in my future, my wedding, my life, you can always do so, but the prerequisite is that you have to accept me as I am now. I'm no longer the fragile person who was hurt by them. I have become stronger and happier." That evening, the engagement party at the Maxwell Mansion was a lively affair. Bright lights illuminated the entire hall. Crystal chandeliers cast dazzling light. Guests dressed in their best clothes, laughing and talking. Harrison and I shuttled among the crowd, enjoying this wonderful moment. However, I did hear some whispers about Thomas and Sarah. It was said that they all tried to get invitations through mutual friends, and some guests even suggested that I invite them, saying that it was an act of magnanimity and strength. You know what? Harrison gently pulled me to the center of the dance floor and whispered, "We can simplify the wedding and get away from all this." I smiled, rested my head on his shoulder, and responded, "No, I want a big wedding. I want everyone to see that their betrayal didn't break me, but set me free." The next morning, as the sun was just shining into the office, Sarah ignored the security protocol and barged in. She looked very different from before. She was no longer wearing designer clothes or exquisite makeup. The woman standing in front of me was a woman who had lost everything and looked desolate. 2 minutes, I said coldly, without even offering her a seat. "This is all the time you get." "I'm sorry." She suddenly broke down and cried. "I'm jealous of everything about you. Your career, your man, your future. I thought that if I married Thomas, I could live that kind of life, but it's all fake." I looked at her quietly, with no anger or resentment in my eyes, only deep pity. "You didn't take anything from me, Sarah," I said calmly. "You made me see what I deserve, not what I had. Can we start over?" She asked with a hint of expectation. "No," I interrupted her gently. "We can't. But I forgive you, not for you, but for myself. Because living with anger is too tiring. I have more important things to do and don't want to waste my energy on these things." Then the security guard took her out. In the hall, I saw Thomas waiting there. Our eyes met. This was a place we had walked through countless times together, but now it felt like we were looking at a stranger. "I heard you were leaving this city." I broke the silence. He nodded slightly, not daring to look me in the eye. "I thought. I didn't expect you to fall apart without me. But you became that incredible strong woman in the business magazines. I almost didn't recognize you. Because you never really knew me, Thomas," I said flatly. "You only saw what you wanted to see." At this time, Harrison arrived on time to have lunch with me. When he saw Thomas, he just nodded politely and shook my hand tightly. "Congratulations." Thomas looked at our clasped hands and said, "You deserve this." Harrison also squeezed my hand and asked me with concern, "Are you okay?" I smiled, feeling very confident in my heart. You know what? The real end is not a certain moment, but when I no longer let their choices determine my future. That night, I sat down at my computer and deleted all the old photos of me and Thomas and Sarah, not out of anger or bitterness, but because they no longer belonged to the story of my life that I was writing. Amy helped me clean up my old office, which contained some of the awards I had won during my relationship with Thomas. What should we do with these? Amy asked. Display them. I thought about it and made a decision. They are part of my life journey, even if the one with him is in the past. DR10, the wedding invitations went out. My mom called me crying, her voice full of pride. Lana, I was so wrong about you. You have grown into a woman that I am so proud of. Some mutual friends asked me if we should invite Thomas and Sarah. D-Satan, I watched Harrison discuss renovation plans with hospital staff, and his enthusiasm for improving healthcare was as strong as my own for the future of my life. I already have everything I need, I told them. At this moment, Thomas has left the city, and Sarah also embarked on the journey of leaving with her parents. Their once perfect wedding photos have now been replaced by news of divorce, but I have long stopped paying attention to their story. I was busy planning my future, looking forward to becoming Mrs. Maxwell Harrison. On the wedding day, the sun was shining brightly, and the city skyline was clearly visible outside the window of the penthouse suite. I had planned with Thomas. Today's celebration was not a display of wealth or a declaration of revenge, but a grand declaration of my victory in life. As the media gathered outside, Amy carefully helped me adjust my custom-made gown, a masterpiece of French craftsmanship that made me look powerful yet elegant. I smiled and gently touched the diamond necklace Harrison had given me that morning. His note read, "To the woman who turned pain into strength. Can't wait to call you my wife." The ballroom of the Grand Plaza Hotel was transformed into a dreamy winter wonderland, with crystal chandeliers gleaming enchantingly and thousands of white roses emitting rich fragrance. As I was about to walk to the other end of the red carpet, my mother appeared with tears in her eyes. Lana, I was so wrong about you. You have become better than I thought. The wedding march slowly played, the door slowly opened, and Harrison stood handsomely in front of the altar in a neat tuxedo. When he saw me, tears flashed in his eyes. Every step I took felt like I was saying goodbye to the past and moving towards a brand new life. Just as we were about to exchange our vows, there was a commotion in the hall. Sarah had somehow managed to break through the security guards, and she looked extremely unstable. "This is supposed to be my life," she screamed, her mascara running down her cheeks. This time, I didn't back down or run away. Harrison immediately stepped forward to protect me, and I gently squeezed his hand to show him that I could handle it. I walked up to her and said calmly, "Sarah, you had a perfect wedding. How did it turn out?" The room suddenly became quiet, and Sarah's fake designer dress was. My couture gown looked so dull next to hers, just as her relationship with Thomas was a poor imitation of true love. I nodded to the security guards, who gently but firmly led Sarah away from the scene. I caught a glimpse of Thomas trying to stop her. He looked old and broken, a far cry from the man I had thought I would spend my life with. I turned and smiled at Harrison. "Now let's get on with it." Our vows were full of love and determination. "You've not only healed my heart," I told him, "but you've also made me realize that a heart is never truly broken. It's just preparing for something greater." The wedding reception was a big celebration party, not only of our love, but also of our triumph over adversity. Business leaders, celebrities, and friends gathered to watch Harrison and I have our first dance. The music started, the same song that had given me strength during my darkest days. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison took the microphone and excitedly announced, "When I first met Lana, she was already amazing. But watching her turn pain into purpose, betrayal into success, I knew she was the one. Not because she needed to be saved, but because she saved herself." We drank champagne together and cut through the layers of the cake, each layer representing a major milestone in our journey. The successful turnaround of the hospital, our business merger, the day we fell in love. News helicopters circled as we left the reception, snapping photos that would dominate the headlines of trade magazines for weeks to come, with headlines like "Power Couple's Perfect Match." In the honeymoon suite, overlooking the city we now partly owned, Harrison pulled me close. "Happy Mrs. Maxwell, are you happier than you've ever been?" "Yes, happier than ever before," I answered truthfully. "But it's not because of this name or this business empire, but because I finally understand that sometimes losing everything is just life showing you that you are capable of getting better things." The next morning, as we were getting ready to leave for our honeymoon, I received one last message from Thomas. "I saw the wedding photos and you look happier than you ever were with me. I'm sorry I didn't become the man you deserve." I looked at the message quietly and clicked delete. For some past chapters, the best response is to stop responding. Are you ready to start our next adventure? Harrison asked me, extending his hand and smiling. Looking at him, my husband, I know that every tear, every betrayal, every painful moment has led me to this moment. I smiled and walked into the private plane with him. As the plane took off and passed over the city, I looked at the hospital for the last time, where my story with Thomas began. Now it no longer symbolizes what I've lost, but what I've gained: power, success, and a love that's better than I ever imagined. Sarah and Thomas' betrayal was a gift in disguise, a gift that allowed me to break free and become who I really am. Not the betrayed ex-girlfriend, but the powerful force that turned heartbreak into a business empire. On the way to the future, I deeply realized that the best revenge is not retaliation, but to make oneself better. And this is exactly what I have done along the way. A person's life may have many twists and turns, but please don't doubt yourself. You are always the best.